Most people think a compliment is just a nice thing to say. They think it's social fluff. They're wrong. A compliment is a bridge, and most of you are burning that bridge the second you step on it. You either give compliments that sound like you're begging for a friend, or you receive them like you're apologizing for being in the room. You're leaking power in both directions. I want to show you how to turn your words into a tool of influence, and it starts with a simple shift in how you see yourself. First, let's look at how you give praise. If you walk up to someone and say, "Wow, you're so smart," you've just put yourself below them. You're looking up, hoping they notice you. That's not a compliment. That's an audition. If you want to give a high-status compliment, you have to be a witness, not a fan. Instead of "You're so smart," try this: "I noticed how you stayed calm when the data went sideways." That's a rare skill. See what happened there? You didn't just praise them, you evaluated them. You showed that you have the standard and they met it. That doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you an authority. It makes your praise worth something. When you are specific, you aren't just giving a gift, you're setting a standard. But here is where the real damage happens: when someone hands a compliment to you. Someone says, "Hey, great job on that project," and what's the first thing you do? You shrink. You say, "Oh, it was nothing," or "I had a lot of help," or "I stayed up all night, I'm actually a mess." Stop right there. When you do that, you are telling the world that your success was an accident. You are telling them that you don't belong in the winner's circle. You think you're being humble. No, you're being unreliable. If you can't own your win, how can I trust you with the next one? Every time you deflect a compliment, you are telling the room that your excellence is a fluke. And nobody follows a fluke. So, how do you fix it? You use the most uncomfortable tool in the shed: silence. When someone compliments you, I want you to look them right in the eyes. No looking at the floor, no fidgeting with your hands. You smile, you let the words land, and you say, "Thank you. I'm really proud of how that turned out." And then you stop. You don't add a "but." You don't add a "however." You allow the moment to be heavy. That silence is where your authority is built. It shows that you aren't seeking their approval. You're accepting their observation. It shows that you know exactly what you're worth. When you stop apologizing for being good at what you do, people stop questioning if you belong there. In the theater of human interaction, the way you distribute praise determines your place in the social hierarchy. Most people believe that the nicer you are, the more people will like you, so they default to adulation. They fanboy or fangirl over success, showering people in generic, high-pitched enthusiasm. They say things like, "Oh my God, you're so amazing," or "I'm your biggest fan." While this feels like kindness, it is actually a massive power leak. When you worship a result, you are implicitly stating that the other person is on a pedestal and you are looking up from the ground. You are signaling that their excellence is so far beyond your own reality that you can only react with shock and awe. This immediately creates a status gap. To the person receiving the praise, you haven't become a friend or a peer, you've become a spectator. If you want to stay high status and build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than subservience, you must move from adulation to observation. Observation is the language of the peer. Adulation is the language of the subordinate. When you observe a detail, you are showing that you have the expertise and the presence of mind to understand how the magic happened. Instead of being blinded by the bright light of the finish line, you are looking at the mechanics of the race. Imagine a high-level executive gives a brilliant speech. The fan rushes up and says, "That was incredible. You're a genius." The executive smiles, says thanks, and forgets that person's name 3 seconds later. But the high-status observer walks up, remains calm, and says, "I noticed how you used that silence after the third slide to let the tension build. That was a very intentional choice." In that moment, the dynamic shifts. The executive thinks, "This person actually sees what I'm doing. They understand the craft." By observing a detail, you have proven that you are a person of substance. You aren't just reacting to a feeling, you are analyzing a performance. You have moved from a fan in the stands to a coach on the sidelines. This shift is crucial because adulation is actually a burden for the person receiving it. When you fanboy over someone, you are putting them under the pressure of your expectations. You are making the interaction about your excitement rather than their achievement. It forces them into a role where they have to be on for you. Observation, however, is a gift of recognition. It tells the other person that their hard work, the tiny invisible details they spent hours perfecting, was actually seen. Everyone wants to be seen, but very few people want to be worshipped. Worship creates a wall, observation creates a bridge. When you focus on a specific detail rather than a generic result, you are signaling that you are someone who pays attention to the world. And you are someone who has standards. And because you have standards, your praise actually carries weight. If you think everything is amazing, then your amazing means nothing. But if you are the person who only speaks up when you notice a specific, high-level execution, your words become a rare and valuable commodity. To master this, you have to train your eyes to look past the shimmer of success. When you see someone who is winning, don't look at the trophy, look at the grip. Look at the discipline, the timing, the tone, or the strategy. By commenting on the why and the how, you keep your feet firmly planted on the same level as the person you are praising. You stay in the low-stakes voice we discussed earlier. You aren't breathless. You are composed. This is especially important in professional environments. If you want to be mentored by someone at the top of your field, don't tell them how much you love their work. Tell them what you learned from a specific technique they used in their last project. This shows them that you are a serious student of the game, not just a member of the audience. You are reclaiming your power by refusing to be dazzled. You are choosing to be an equal who recognizes excellence rather than a subordinate who is overwhelmed by it. This is how you build a network of powerful people, not by looking up at them, but by looking directly at them and calling out the truth of what you see. You stop being a consumer of their success and start being a connoisseur of their craft. That is the difference between being a fan and being a force. The pivot. Rejection is a psychological trap that most people fall into under the guise of humility, but in reality, it is a broadcast of insecurity. When someone hands you a compliment and your immediate reaction is to push it away, to pivot the credit to luck, to the weather, or to a self-deprecating joke, you are sending a very specific signal to everyone watching. You are telling them that your success was an accident. You are signaling that you are surprised by your own achievement. And if you are surprised by your excellence, why should anyone else believe in it? High-status individuals, leaders, and those who command a room are never surprised by their own quality because they know exactly how much work, discipline, and intentionality went into the result. When you deflect, you aren't being humble. You are being unreliable. You are telling the room that you don't actually know how you succeeded, which implies that you might not be able to do it again. Think about the mechanics of the pivot. Someone says, "That was an incredible presentation," and you reply, "Oh, I just got lucky that the projector worked." You think you're being likable, but what you've actually done is insulted the intelligence of the person who gave you the compliment. You've told them that their judgment is flawed and that they are overvaluing something that you consider a fluke. More importantly, you have lowered your status. In the hierarchy of competence, those at the top expect to perform well. They don't walk around with an arrogant swagger, but they possess a quiet, steady expectation of their own effectiveness. When a professional athlete makes a game-winning shot, they don't look around with wide eyes as if they can't believe the ball went in. They jog back to the locker room because that is what they were trained to do. When you pivot away from praise, you are essentially telling your audience that you are a lucky amateur rather than a trained professional. This behavior also creates a social debt for the person trying to be kind to you. When you reject a compliment, the other person often feels the need to double down. If they say, "You look great," and you say, "No, I look tired," you have now forced them to argue with you. You've put them in a position where they have to convince you of your own worth. This is exhausting for the other person, and it shifts the energy of the interaction from one of celebration to one of emotional labor. High-status people do not make others work to be nice to them. They accept the gift of the compliment with the same ease that they would accept a glass of water. They understand that by accepting the praise, they are validating the giver's perspective and closing the loop of the interaction. They don't need to pivot because they are comfortable with the space they occupy. To fix this, you have to kill the but and the just. Most pivots start with those two words, "I just got lucky," or Thanks, but it was really a team effort. While team credit is important, using it as a shield to hide your own contribution is a form of social cowardice. It is possible to be both grateful and firm in your ownership. If you want to maintain your authority, you have to learn to catch the compliment. Instead of letting it pass through you, you let it land. You look the person in the eye, you give a slight nod, and you say, "Thank you. I put a lot of work into that." This doesn't make you a narcissist, it makes you an honest person. It confirms that the result was intentional. When you stop being surprised by your own excellence, the world stops questioning it. You begin to project an aura of inevitability. People start to trust you with bigger tasks and higher stakes because they see that you are a person who expects to win. Reclaiming your win isn't about ego, it's about establishing a baseline of competence that others can rely on. You have to be the first person to believe that you belong at the top, and that belief starts with the way you handle the moments when people try to put you there. Stop the pivot, stand your ground, and let the excellence be exactly what it is, a result of your choice, not a stroke of your luck. In the vast ocean of daily social interactions, most compliments are nothing more than surface-level waves. They create a brief splash and then disappear without a trace. We are surrounded by a constant hum of "good job," "nice work," and "looking great." These are what I call noisy compliments. They are polite, they are well-intentioned, but they are ultimately hollow because they lack the weight of evidence. When you give a compliment without a why, you are essentially asking the other person to do the work of figuring out if you're being sincere, because the human brain is wired for skepticism. Particularly in professional or competitive environments, a generic compliment is often filtered out as social background noise, or worse, as manipulative flattery. However, when you attach an unexpected why to your praise, you transform that noise into an anchor. An anchor is something that hooks into the listener's identity and stays there. It is a specific observation that proves you weren't just being polite, you were being a witness to their reality. The power of the unexpected why lies in its ability to bypass the politeness filter and land directly in the recipient's long-term memory. Most of us have a standard script for how we respond to generic praise. When someone says, "You're a great leader," our brain barely registers it because it's a category, not a characteristic. But if someone says, "You're a great leader because I noticed how you waited for the quietest person in the room to finish their thought before you moved to the next agenda item," that compliment becomes an anchor. It is impossible to ignore because it is based on a granular observable fact. By providing the why, you are providing the receipt for your praise. You are saying, "I didn't just decide to say something nice to you. I observed a specific action, I processed its value, and I am now reporting it back to you." This level of intentionality is rare, and because it is rare, it is incredibly high status. It shows that you are a person who notices the nuances that others miss. Furthermore, why acts as a psychological reward system that reinforces the exact behaviors you want to see more of. In any relationship, whether you are a manager, a parent, or a partner, you have the power to shape the environment through what you choose to highlight. If you only praise results, people will become stressed about meeting those results at any cost. But if you praise the why behind the process, you are anchoring their value to their character. When you tell a colleague, "I really appreciate your input," it's noise. When you tell them, "I really appreciate your input because you have a way of simplifying complex problems that makes the rest of us feel more confident," you have just anchored their identity as a simplifier. They will now unconsciously work harder to live up to that specific observation. You aren't just being nice, you are being an architect of their professional development. You are giving them a specific piece of their own identity to hold on to. This technique also protects your own credibility. When you are the person who always adds a why, you become known as a truth teller. In a world where people are constantly looking for hidden agendas, the person who provides specific evidence for their praise is viewed as someone with high integrity. You aren't just throwing out compliments to buy favor, you are making an assessment. This creates a fascinating power dynamic. Because your praise is based on logic and observation, people begin to seek it out. Your "well done" becomes the gold standard because everyone knows you don't give it away for free. You only give it when you see the why. You become the person whose feedback actually matters because it is grounded in the real world. You are no longer just a participant in the social noise. You are the one who provides the signal. By refusing to speak in generalities, you force the people around you to step up their game, and in doing so, you elevate your own status as the person who defines what excellence looks like in the room. You move from the shallow end of generic pleasantries into the deep water of meaningful influence. Simply by adding one or two specific reasons to every kind word you speak. Ownership is the silent engine of authority, yet most people treat it like a liability they need to offload as quickly as possible. We live in a culture that confuses self-deprecation with humility, leading us to believe that if we own our successes, we are somehow being arrogant. But there is a massive psychological difference between arrogance and self-assurance. Arrogance is a loud demand for validation. Self-assurance is the quiet acceptance of it. When someone offers you a compliment and you immediately follow it with a "but," you are engaging in an act of linguistic sabotage. You are taking a moment of peak authority and intentionally diluting it. By saying, "Thanks, but it was mostly the software," or "Thanks, but I got lucky," you are essentially telling the room that you are uncomfortable with your own power. You are signaling that you do not believe you earned the space you are currently occupying. To build true professional and personal authority, you must learn to accept a compliment without a "but," treating your excellence not as a fluke, but as a standard. The word "but" is a negator. It functions as an eraser for everything that came before it. When you use it in response to praise, you are actively erasing your own competence in the mind of the observer. Think about the message this sends to a supervisor or a client. If they praise your work and you immediately point out a flaw or shift the credit elsewhere, you aren't just being modest. You are making them feel like they made a mistake in trusting you. You are creating a competence gap where one didn't exist. High-status individuals understand that their reputation is a bank account and compliments are deposits. When you add a "but," you are essentially refusing the deposit and handing the money back. Ownership, on the other hand, is the ultimate display of self-assurance because it shows that you are not surprised by your own value. It shows that you have an internal compass that is more stable than the external opinions of others. You don't need to argue with the praise because you already know it to be true. Moreover, the refusal to use a "but" is an act of respect toward the person giving the compliment. When someone takes the time to recognize your effort, they are making a vulnerability-based observation. They are stepping out of their own lane to acknowledge yours. When you counter their praise with a "but," you are effectively telling them that their observation is wrong. You are correcting them. This creates a subtle friction that makes people less likely to praise you in the future. Nobody likes to be corrected, even when the correction is wrapped in humility. By simply owning the compliment, you are validating their judgment and strengthening the social bond. You are allowing the positive energy of the moment to exist without being suffocated by your own insecurity. This clean acceptance, a simple "thank you, I appreciate that," creates a vacuum of confidence that draws people toward you. It makes you appear grounded, centered, and most importantly, ready for more responsibility. Reclaiming ownership of your wins also changes your internal chemistry. Every time you accept a compliment without an excuse, you are training your brain to recognize your own agency. You are moving from a victim of luck mindset to a master of craft mindset. This shift is visible in your body language. When you don't feel the need to justify your success, your shoulders stay down, your eye contact remains steady, and your voice stays in that low-stakes register of authority. You stop being the person who is just happy to be here and start being the person who is here to lead. Authority is not something that is given to you by a title. It is something you claim through the way you handle your own excellence. It is the ability to stand in the spotlight without blinking. By removing the "but" from your vocabulary, you are removing the apology from your existence. You are standing tall in the reality of your own hard work, and in doing so, you give everyone else in the room permission to do the same. You stop being a person who happened to do something good, and you become a person who is fundamentally good at what they do. That is the essence of ownership, and it is the only foundation upon which real authority can be built. In the realm of high-stakes leadership, The compliment is often misunderstood as a tool for social lubrication or a way to make people feel good. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology. If you want to move from being a manager who is liked to a leader who is followed, you must view the compliment as a strategic reward mechanism. It is a psychological reinforcement tool that, when used correctly, allows you to architect the culture of your team or your household without ever having to raise your voice. Most people give compliments randomly whenever they happen to feel a burst of positivity. A leader, however, gives compliments intentionally, specifically targeting the behaviors that align with the mission. It isn't about being nice. Niceness is often passive and directionless. It's about being a leader who understands that whatever behavior is recognized and rewarded with attention will inevitably be repeated. Think of attention as the most valuable resource you possess. Wherever you shine the light of your attention, that area will grow. Most people make the mistake of only giving attention to problems. They only speak up when something is broken or when someone has failed. This inadvertently trains people that the only way to get the leader's focus is through crisis or incompetence. The reward mechanism flips this script. By using the unexpected why to highlight a specific positive behavior, even a small one, you are providing a dopamine hit that the recipient will subconsciously seek to replicate. If you want a team that is more punctual, you don't just complain about the latecomers. You pull aside the person who is consistently prepared and say, "I noticed you always have your notes ready before the meeting starts." That level of preparation makes the whole team more efficient. You have just rewarded preparation. You have set a benchmark. You haven't asked for a change, you've reinforced a standard through the power of recognition. This approach is rooted in the principle of operant conditioning. Behavior that is followed by a positive consequence is more likely to recur. However, for this to work as a leadership tool, the compliment must be stripped of any fluff. It must be delivered with the low-stakes authority we've discussed. If the praise feels like you are trying to be a nice guy, the reward loses its value. It becomes social noise. But if the praise is delivered as a matter of fact observation of excellence, it becomes a professional validation that the recipient will treasure. This is because high performers don't actually want niceness. They want to be seen as competent. They want to know that their specific contributions are being weighed and measured by someone they respect. When you use your compliments to reward the how of their work rather than just the what, you are giving them a roadmap for how to succeed under your leadership. You are essentially saying, "This is what excellence looks like in my world. Do more of this." Furthermore, the reward mechanism allows you to manage and sideways just as effectively as you manage down. If you have a difficult boss who rarely gives feedback, but they happen to send one clear, concise email, you can reward that behavior. You reply with, "I really appreciated the clarity of that last update. It allowed me to move twice as fast on the project." You are now training your boss. You are reinforcing the specific communication style that makes your life easier. This isn't manipulation, it's social engineering for the sake of efficiency. It is the realization that everyone, regardless of their title, is seeking some form of validation for their efforts. By being the one who provides that validation in a targeted, strategic way, you become the person who defines the vibe of the room. You become the person who subtly directs the energy of the group toward productivity and respect. Ultimately, using compliments as a reward mechanism is about taking responsibility for the social environment you inhabit. If you are surrounded by people who are lazy, vague, or disrespectful, you have to ask yourself, what behaviors am I accidentally rewarding with my silence, and what behaviors am I failing to reward with my voice? A leader doesn't wait for a perfect team to appear. They build one by consistently calling out the gold. They see in others until that gold becomes the standard. This requires you to stop seeing your praise as a limited resource that you need to hoard and start seeing it as a strategic investment. When you reward the right behaviors, you stop having to manage the wrong ones. You move from a state of constant firefighting to a state of fire lighting, where you are igniting the best parts of the people around you and watching them burn with a sense of purpose and pride. This is the highest form of influence, not demanding that people change, but noticing and rewarding them when they do. We live in an era that worships accessibility. We are told that the best leaders, The best friends and the most nice people are the ones who are always available, always responsive, and always leave their door wide open. We wear our busyness and our constant availability as a badge of honor, thinking that by being a 24/7 resource for others, we are proving our worth. But the harsh reality of social dynamics is that availability is the enemy of authority. In the economy of human interaction, value is driven by scarcity. When you make yourself infinitely available, when you answer every text in 10 seconds, accept every quick meeting invite, and allow anyone to interrupt your deep work, you are subconsciously telling the world that your time has no market value. You are signaling that you have nothing more important to do than to wait for someone else to need you. This is the open door trap. You think you are being helpful, but you are actually becoming a commodity. When you are a commodity, you are replaceable. When you are a gated community, you are a destination. High-status individuals understand that their presence must be earned. They don't do this out of arrogance. They do it out of a necessity to protect their mental bandwidth. Every time you allow a low-value interruption to breach your focus, you aren't just losing 10 minutes, you are losing the momentum of excellence. You are paying a switching tax that drains your ability to do the high-level thinking that actually solves problems. The nice person stays in the shallow end of the pool because they are too afraid to tell someone, "I am unavailable right now." They fear that if they close the door, they will be perceived as cold or elitist. But the person of authority knows that a closed door is a sign of a focused mind. It tells the world, something important is happening in here. Reclaiming your scarcity means setting borders of engagement. It means moving away from the always-on culture and moving toward intentional presence. When you are with someone, be 100% there. That is the kinness part. But when you are working, be 100% gone. That is the authority part. If people know they can reach you whenever they have a minor whim, they will never learn to solve their own problems. You are actually crippling their growth by being too available. You become their external brain, their emotional safety net, and their constant crutch. By closing the door, you are forcing them to develop their own agency. You are saying, "I trust you to handle this until I am ready." This shift creates a massive spike in your perceived value. When you finally do open the door, when you finally do walk into the room or join the call, your presence carries weight because it wasn't guaranteed. Think of your life like a premium service. People value a doctor they have to wait 3 weeks to see more than a walk-in clinic. They value a restaurant with a 1-month waiting list more than a fast food joint. This isn't just marketing. It's human nature. We value what we cannot easily have. If you want people to listen when you speak, you have to stop speaking all the time. If you want people to respect your time, you have to stop giving it away for free. Start implementing office hours for your life. Create windows where you are a resource and create dark zones where you are a phantom. You will find that the world doesn't fall apart when you aren't there to hold it up. In fact, it starts to respect you more. You move from being the person everyone uses to the person everyone consults. You transition from being a servant to everyone's distractions to being the master of your own destiny. Close the door, protect the light, and watch how much more people appreciate the moments when you choose to let them in